One of the things I was very keen on was that we would have a game that we could go straight onto. So before finishing Lyra the Temptress, I came up with pitched a new idea, which was later to be called Beneath the Steel Sky. And I'd worked at Activision. My boss, Rod Cousins, had asked me to get in touch with a comic book artist called Dave Gibbons, because we were interested in potentially licensing Watchmen. So I'd met up with Dave. And Dave is a great guy. I mean, it was lovely, and it struck me that perhaps we could work with him on this new game, Beneath the Steel Sky. And I contacted him and asked him if he'd be interested. And to my delight and my amazement, he was very much into it. He loved the idea of doing it.
Charles got in touch with me in the late 80s when he was working for a company called Activision, and he'd seen Watchmen and his colleagues had seen Watchmen, and they thought there might be a way that I could use my kind of design and world building and character building skills to, become involved in producing a game with them. And I was really interested by that because, as I say, there seemed to be a similar kind of enthusiasm that was operating with Charles and his contemporaries. Just as I'd been a kid who grew up reading comics and then sat in his bedroom drawing his own comics, they were kids who'd grown up playing games and sat in their bedrooms creating games. So it was a very similar kind of process. And I've always loved collaboration as well. I went along and met Charles, and I could see that he was somebody that I could very happily collaborate with.
The collaboration was very unique in that it was the first time that Revolution had collaborated with somebody outside the games industry. And we were bringing somebody in from the comic book world, which was really a marriage made in heaven. It was very close to what we were doing with the graphics was very similar. Only ours was more interactive and animated. But I think it was also a first, possibly for the sector, to collaborate with people that hadn't a history within the game sector itself. So it was a really big moment for us.
We originally started talking about it when I was at Mirrorsoft in terms of the concept of Underworld, with the world being kind of upside down as it were. So those early moments I don't really recall very well. It's just later at Virgin when we were really talking about the game itself, and it was really, I think it was for me, it was the visual appeal that struck. I mean, the storyline was very interesting, but I think it was the whole visual appeal. And then once, Charles decided to get Dave Gibbons involved in it, and I was a big fan at the time of Watchmen, and so were various other people at Virgin, so it kind of made it a lot easier. But it was that concept of, wow, interesting storyline, but also visually very, very stunning.
So we started the game as we were finishing off Lyra the Temptress. And Dave came up on a regular basis and worked with us on the story. He really got into it. He actually got a copy of D-Paint, which was a pixel art package, and created a number of the characters directly on D-Paint.
As far as the sprites were concerned, as far as the characters moving on the backgrounds were concerned, obviously I could draw wonderful detailed pictures of Foster in his leather coat with all the highlights on it and all the pockets and all this kind of stuff and the exact expression on his face. But then when I was told that this would all have to be represented on screen by a kind of a matrix of squares with a limited palette of, 250 colours possibly, and I don't know how big the little matrix of pixels was, but it might have been 60 by 60 or some kind of figure like that. I thought, well, the only way I can fairly do this is to actually design it pixel by pixel. And it's incredible now in the days of Photoshop and Painter and Manga Studio to think the only real art package that was available to me then was a thing called Deluxe Paint, D-Paint. I think I used version 2, and this was done on an Amiga computer, where you literally would click a colour in a pixel and then stand back from it to see what it looked like with a bit of distance as it went out of focus. And it became such a almost like making jewellery or something, that by slightly changing a highlight colour you could change the whole form of it. So again, that was incredibly challenging.
And then he passed them to Steve Oates, and Steve would then animate them. And it was just great. We were a very small team. There were about 6 or 7 of us. We pulled in another couple of people towards the end of that. A fellow called Steve Ince came to join us. Steve has had great success as an adventure writer since then. and it was a small, compact team working together in this grotty little office above an arcade in the town centre of Hull.
We had no network. We did work in a nice office with heaters, but we had no network. So I remember we used to, because there was a lot more data, we had a sort of virtual network whereby we had like floppy disks, 3.5-inch floppy disks, and we would basically you would create your file, and then if you wanted to pass it to, if I wanted to pass a file to you, I would get the disk and I would go, and you would have to catch this disk. And after a year or so of this, we all got very adept at catching these disks and then putting them straight in the computer and get the file, and that's how we wrote Beneath a Steel Sky. I mean, it was craziness compared to how we do it now, but that's how it was, you know.
You have to believe that your collaborators know what they're doing, and they're working as hard as you are. And certainly with Revolution, I always got that feeling, and Charles would always be so much on top of things and have the overview of it. So there was a good organisation there, and as I say, the skills of the individual people. Steve Oates, who did the graphics, was masterful at that. Dave Cummings would write things that would make me laugh out loud. So it felt like a really good team, and you felt like everybody was pulling together. I think when you feel you're supporting somebody or they're taking credit for something that they haven't actually done, that's when you get into difficulties. But I never had that feeling with Revolution. I was really, really pleased to be one of the team members.
Link, we can't let him escape.
What the hell is going on? Reich seems pretty cut up about it.
I was leading with Dave Cummins, and Dave was the writer, and we'd write the puzzles together. And then Dave would come up once a month, we'd send him our notes, and we'd talk about the story, we'd talk about the game, the puzzles as they developed. And it was just a great collaboration. It worked really, really well. It was a huge pleasure. And it was great to see that somebody from a different medium, while accepting that gameplay trumped everything, could contribute wonderfully. I mean, his genius of Watchmen, the genius of so many comic books he'd written, and he brought all of that to Beneath the Steel Sky, and that's one of the reasons why I think it had such wide popularity.
One of the aspects of Watchmen that I'd really enjoyed, and the other things I'd done, was this world building thing of coming up with a world that looked coherent, that could be seen from a number of angles, and you would never fall out of that world of characters that remain consistent from picture to picture. So I knew that I sort of had the skills and the interest that I could do something like video games with the level of involvement that Charles wanted me to have. I mean, obviously, I haven't got a clue how you code these things, how you actually technically make them appear on screen. But I knew that the aspect of having my vision go through undiluted was a possibility. And that was exactly what Charles wanted me to do, is to design a world that they could set a game in. I think the fact that it was a sort of a dystopic science fiction world rather than a magic world or something like that was an attraction as well, because that's the area that I've always been interested in.
The original name was Underworld, not an enormously inspiring name, but the idea again, Underworld, where everything was reversed. So the idea, the opposite of New York, that as you got higher, it became more and more smoggy, and so the poorer people lived, and your ambition was to actually live on the ground.
There were a lot of things about society that came into play, because we were talking about a dystopic future. So you, of course, extrapolate how your present day at any given time could move forward into the future. And this was sort of, in the kind of height of Thatcherism, with the consumer society and divisions in society becoming ever deeper, with Thatcher actually, her infamous quote, there is no such thing as society, it's every man for himself. And these ideas were obviously floating around in our heads when we created the world of Beneath the Steel Sky.
You had the rise of the yuppies, you had the mega rich and the ultra poor. You had a lot of conflict within society. And I think a lot of what went into Beneath the Steel Sky came from that.
Maybe I'd get some answers now. If I survived another copter crash.
Going way back to the very beginning of the game. This is the scene just after the helicopter crashes. Now, there was a 3D model of this helicopter which was used for the animated sequence, but I then had to take it and draw it in scene. So this is a very rough initial drawing of a layout of how everything works. And as you can see, there's an area here that's been highlighted in red, obviously needed to be changed. And I see that Charles has written across it in biro, emphasise that the copter is broken. So I had to redraw a bit of that. And on the side here, we'd have the screen number. And it was originally called Underworld, which at this point is still the title here. It describes what's happening, wreck and roadblock. I think this was probably the first screen that I actually drew. This is, in fact, it says screen 1. And this is after Foster has escaped the helicopter crash and escaped the security and run into the factory, the first factory area we see. And this had to be quite carefully choreographed, so we'd have a little sprite at the bottom of the stairs, getting bigger in stages, but the getting bigger concealed actually by the stairs, so we didn't have to resize the sprite in motion. I was very keen on having these foreground objects because it adds tremendous depth to it, and it means that Foster and the other characters have got something to run behind. And then once Foster got through the door, we'd see this big cityscape, which again is extremely detailed now that I look at it. And the idea was that he came out of this door and somehow got across this space and got in one of these windows. So he had to see Foster and a rope. But then we realised that actually he needed more than a rope to get up to here, or he would have to throw the rope and then climb it. So I traced off the shot again and changed some of the details so that now the platform was higher, the windows were lower, and there was an item here that he could throw a hook at with the rope attached and swing through the windows below. So all that organisational stuff was worked out here before any colour was added. And these tight drawings would then go to an artist called Les Pace, who would, in a traditional manner, paint them with gouache paint and watercolours.
This could be the most stupid thing I've ever done.
Steel Sky I remember as being a very difficult project, even more difficult than Load the Temptress in a way. I mean, I think we upscaled our ambition, and after the success of Lure, we thought we could do more, and we thought we should do more with the virtual theatre system. So, our ambitions went up. Virgin wanted us to do a bigger game, and push it to the next level. So that's what we did.
Quick, get that anchor while he's away. And hurry before the jerk gets back.
And in fact, if I recall, it was actually, I think, the first game that certainly I come across that had speech as well. And it was before, of course, it was very text-driven kind of adventures. This actually had speech in it, full speech, recorded in a professional way, which was, a first.
Where did you get that robot? I built him. Like it? It's crap, son.
As far as the name Beneath the Steel Sky is concerned, my memory is that was a pretty late compromise. That one of the names that I think I came up with was Underworld, which just sounded great to me because it had so many connotations of kind of hell and of kind of crime and gangsterism. But then someone said, "Oh no, there's another game called Underworld, or it's got Underworld as a subtitle." And I think it was either Charles or somebody very close to him on his development side of it that threw that name into the pot. And I didn't like it, but I now really do like it because it's so unusual and it's so unlike any other game. And it also does happen to compress quite nicely to BASS, B-A-S-S, which sounds kind of cool, I think.
The game released in 1994, and the reviews were exceptional. We were getting 90, 95, wonderful reviews and some great comments.
We had great expectations for it, but we never really knew until the game came out. And again, it came out to really, I think, pretty universal critical acclaim.
We were feeling pleased about it. It felt good. And I remember one review came out. It was our good friend Simon Byron writing for The One magazine, and he said, "I can sum this game up in one word: superb." And that summed it up as well for the bulk of the reviews. It was a good game, and it was people still love it today. It's turned into a cult game, and we felt we were onto something then, and our confidence was growing from Lure of the Temptress, and it went well, and we were very pleased.
It won Best Adventure Game. It won the Golden Joystick that year for Best Adventure Game, and on the marketing muscle that Virgin had, built on great reviews, the game was commercially very, very successful, and that was fantastic, and that stood us in very, very good stead. And it was at that point that actually Virgin came and said, "Look, these games have been great, but if we're going to compete directly with LucasArts, we need to up the ante next time."
Hi, who are you?
Can't you tell? I'm Mr. Cool.